Hey everyone, it's Mojaxx back in the DJcity lockdown lab. Now, things are getting better in some parts of the world, but they're going backwards in other parts of the world, and it's clear that, the situation in terms of live music and DJing is not going to be back to normal for quite some time yet. And so I know that lots of you out there are looking at different ways to just kind of keep yourselves out there and to keep earning a living during these times. And streaming is one of those. I've focused on that a lot here on the channel in recent months. But another one could well be podcasting. And if you're going to start a podcast, be that a music or a talk podcast, there's one bit of kit which you probably ought to be looking at. Let's get into it. The Rodecaster Pro is a complete podcast studio in one box. Just add the number of microphones that you need and that's it. It has a street price of around $600 in the US, so it's not exactly a budget piece, but if you start to break it down into the various component parts, audio interface, standalone recorder, control surface, then you'd be very hard pushed to come close to that price. There are multiple different ways of working with the Rodecaster Pro. You can record directly to a micro SD card or to software on your computer via USB, or you can feed the output of the device into another mixer or interface with the monitor line outputs. You have the option to record your show as live or as a multi-track, allowing you to go back afterwards and edit levels, etc. with ease. You can even record as a whole show to the SD card whilst recording multi-track to your computer or vice versa. Construction is solid with a combination of plastic and metal build, and the whole thing feels super dense, not fragile in any way. The manufacturers clearly know this thing is going to be taken on the road and have built it accordingly, but I'd still recommend picking up a deck saver or a flight case for the device if you're going to travel with it often. The slanted design feels great, putting the control surface at a comfortable angle, and it leaves plenty of space around the rear for the hookups. A brief look at those, there are 4 mic inputs with balanced XLR sockets. Those feed into what Rode call Class A servo biased preamps, which sound very good, even before getting into digital adjustments and tweaking. More on that later. There's an 1/8" TRRS jack socket next to those for inputting line level in and feeding mic level back out to a phone, but of course that can just be used as a regular line input. Then we have 4 headphone outputs, all on 1/4" jacks, with a duplicated 1/8" socket around the front for the first one. That means that the host on channel 1 can cue and PFL whatever they like on the board, and the 3 other guests have a feed of the main output fed to their headphones at all times, and they all have individual level controls. Super easy, super slick. There's a pair of balanced 1/4" jacks for feeding out to monitors, again with a dedicated level control. Then you have the micro SD card slot, a USB-C socket to go to your computer, which also works fine with USB 2, and the power supply input. The Rodecaster does require external power, it doesn't have a battery, but what's very cool is that the company recently released an optional adapter, which allows the unit to be powered by a USB power bank, making it truly mobile. The faders aren't the most premium feeling things I've ever touched, particularly on the demo unit I had, which has clearly been well used, but they're good enough for the task in hand. The pads and buttons all have a good positive action, and I like the small step increments on the level knobs. The screen is bright and clear with good viewing angles and is very responsive to touch. A quick note on the software side of things, there is a companion application which lets you transfer shows from the device to your computer and add new sounds to the sound banks. That's very easy to use with 8 banks of 8 sounds to utilise, although I did find it a little unintuitive that the extra banks don't appear until you've added sounds to the previous ones. One fantastic feature is that there appears to be no limit on how long the sounds can be, aside from storage space. I was able to load up a 4.5 hour mix file recorded as AAC to a pad, so you can easily load pre-recorded interviews, mixes, or entire shows to those pads. The app also lets you tweak the different effects on the unit from there too, on the fly. With all that said, let's show you how this thing works. So I think the best thing to do is just going to be to talk you through the whole thing from one side to the other, basically. We'll go through the different channels, etc. So we have 4 mic channels, all with XLR inputs on the rear, each one with their own fader control, cue mode, and a mute button. Then we have different effects for those. We'll get into those in a second. Over here, we have our USB connection to your computer. Now you can record from the device to your computer directly, use it as an interface in that way, and you can return sound back from the computer as well. So if you're doing a Skype call, for example, you can set up a mix minus on there, and that means that anyone who's on the other end of the Skype call or the Zoom or whatever it's going to be can't actually hear themselves back and have that weird kind of loop back effect that will just go back and forth. I've got nothing coming through there at the moment. Then we have the smartphone input. Now this is a TRRS mini jack. So again, you can use it for Skype or even phone calls with a mix minus on there, or you can just run it as a line input. So that's what I'm doing here. I've just got music coming in from a mixer into there. And that, if you're a DJ, you're doing a music podcast, that may be what you want to end up using. So again, it's got its own fader, Q button on there, and the mute button as well. Then we have a Bluetooth input, and again, same kind of thing again. So Bluetooth in and out. Then on the right hand side, we have our sound pads.
You're listening to Progress with Mojaxx,
which you can customize and put whatever you want on those. You have three
If you're
banks.
watching on any other platform, come join the Twitch fam for the full Progress experience at twitch.tv/MojaxxDJ. Live on twitch.tv/MojaxxDJ. Every Wednesday, you're watching Progress with Mojaxx.
And you can control those. We'll show you how you control those in a minute. We have different level outputs for the 4 headphone outs. So each person who's got a microphone can be listening as well. The main one has the pre-fader stuff on it, so you can actually listen to the cue signal, and the rest of them just have the master output. So they're just getting the master all the time. Then we have a level control for our speaker output, our monitor output, which is on the large jacks on the rear. So I'm running into that now. Something very cool about that I will show you in a minute. Let's get up to the screen then. So we have this new meter mode with the actual levels on there, which it didn't used to have before. That's a new option in the new firmware. Each channel on the mics has these options. So we've got the microphone. You can choose what kind of microphone you have. If you've got a Rode mic, in this case, I'm using the Rode Podmic. So it's kind of preset to sound good with that microphone. You can also do like 1, 2, 3, yeah, generic, dynamic or condenser as well. And then we have other options. We can set the level, so we can pre-fade the level. Whenever you're doing something like a podcast, it's ideal to have each level be preset correctly and then be able to just whack the fader to the top. That's generally the way you want to work when you're doing something like this. And we can enable phantom power there as well if we need to have a condenser mic with phantom power. Audio processing. Now you can turn this on or off completely. And originally on older versions of the firmware, you couldn't actually tweak these individually. Now you can. You can go in and adjust, say, your high pass filter, where you want that to kick in. The noise gate. So that's going to cut out, just set it to, so that can cut out the sort of when you're not talking. And you need to play, you'll have to play with the threshold on that and play with all these different settings. You can turn off the advanced settings for it, but yeah, I've just turned it off altogether for now. De-esser, so your sibilance, you can reduce that one. Again, loads of settings for that. And a compressor, so you can bring your voice up and just give you a bit more presence and a bit more overall kind of punchiness to the sound. And we have these Aphex effects as well. The big bottom, which gives you a lot more kind of presence, Barry White style, and the aural exciter. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of those on my voice, but they might work for you and they might work for your microphone. And that's the key, is that these can just be fully adjusted however you want, or just turn them all off. It's entirely up to you. So you got those on each of the 4 different mic channels, and then we have other settings we can mess with as well. So this is our soundboard. We can actually change and edit those. We can transfer new ones from the computer. You can change how they play as well. So this one now will now pause.
Listening to Progress with.
It will
You're
start
listening
over,
to Progress with Mojaxx.
and it will latch on and off. So you've got different options. If you've used like the Serato sampler, you'll understand how all that stuff kind of works. You can also record stuff in, and you can overdub as well. So it's pretty powerful stuff going on with that. So you've got stock effects and you've got your own personal banks that you can use as well. So that's this is the standard stuff. Should we go into those? Let's see. I'm doing my podcast. I made a funny joke. I said a cool thing. Oh no, this one didn't land. So yeah, I love those kind of stock ones, but you can totally add your own in. They're brilliant. I love it. So,
Live on twitch.tv/MojaxxDJ. Every Wednesday, you're watching.
and you'll notice that once you've got one playing, you can switch to another bank and it plays your one from the new bank as well, which is pretty cool. I wasn't sure how that was going to work, and it works really, really nicely. Back to some more effects then. So we've got the 4 channels for the mics, USB. Got different presets for speech or music depending on what you're playing in there. And again, you can add those Aphex effects onto it and preset your level. So again, you want to slam your levels to the top. That's generally what you want to do, is either slam levels to the top or use the mic or use the mute button on those. But yeah, same thing applies on the smartphone. Presets again, and the Bluetooth presets, music, phone call, speech. And you've got advanced settings again for that as well. So if it's speech, you can put on the high pass filter and the exciter and all of this stuff. So you can go really deep with this. But as you can see, it's pretty straightforward to use. Like, it's not actually very hard. Anyone certainly watching this who's got a basic understanding of audio mixing is going to have no problem with this at all. You've got a master compressor, which you can whack on the whole signal. And so we can see it kicks in just a little bit there when I'm talking very loud, but you can adjust the threshold, you can adjust the ratio. All of this give you that kind of punchy radio sound for your podcast. And then we have, so that's your sound settings. The advanced, we've got micro SD card, which is what we're recording to now. You can also record, obviously, from the USB, and you can do that in a few different ways. And this is quite interesting. Multi-track, you can turn that on. So instead of recording one big file, it will record multi-track, so each track comes through on a different track, and you can do that with the USB. You can then bypass the audio processing and have it completely clean. So each of your channels comes through entirely clean into your recording, and you can then process it all and edit it afterwards. So if you're doing a live podcast, but you want the ability to edit it all afterwards, this gives you that possibility. Plus you've got post fader as well. It's kind of half and half that way. You've still got the fader movements and everything else, but you've got separate channels. So you can still adjust overall levels, etc. after the fact. Very, very cool. This is awesome, right? We've got automatically mute outputs. This is what makes this effectively a proper radio desk, because right now I'm playing music through that line level input and nothing is coming out of the speakers at all. Like, I've got a speaker hooked up, nothing's coming out. But if I now go to switch off my mic, so I'll just mute it. That's now coming. You're hearing me through the camera's microphone. And so we've got the speaker playing music, but as soon as I turn my mic back on and make it live, that goes off. So I can hear what's going on in my headphones. The mic is on. The mic is off. The mic is on. The mic is off. And it reacts instantly. I love that. Makes it proper, like a radio studio feel. You can really go in there and just not have to worry about muting anything. It just does it all itself. You can disable the level knob for those that monitor output as well, so you're just sending a fixed signal out. Enable pre-fade listen, so you've got 2 styles of monitoring on your headphones and the broadcast meters, and that's basically it. Loads of power, but still very, very straightforward to use. Rode also sent me a couple of accessories to go with the Rodecaster Pro, which I'm guessing will probably be high up the shopping list for any potential purchasers. The first is the $99 PSA-1 Microphone Arm, which no doubt you've seen at least a few times before if you've ever watched any amount of video podcasts, YouTube or live streams. It's undoubtedly a big step above the generic $20 arms which are all over Amazon and eBay. It has smooth, quiet operation, is easy to adjust and stays where you put it. It just feels like a much higher end piece of kit. It's also quite a bit longer than most cheaper stands, which gives you more options as to where you can place it. The only thing I don't like about the PSA-1 is the external cable routing. It has channels at the joints to tidy things up, but you're always going to be left with lengths of cable velcroed onto the arm itself. There are some advantages to that. The cable can be quickly swapped out without any hassle, so it just really depends on your priorities. I've seen people do DIY internal routing on it, but it's a job that involves soldering and therefore won't be for everyone. It comes with a regular desk clamp and a more permanent mount which can be bolted through the desk surface, giving you even more flexibility of placement. Overall, a very professional product all around, and it's thoroughly recommended. The second accessory that Rode sent me is the Podmic, which is remarkably affordable at $99. It's an end address microphone with a cardioid polar pattern, which means you speak straight into the end of it, and it's excellent at rejecting noise from the back and the sides, ideal in noisy environments or when you're podcasting with other guests. It's also a dynamic mic, not a condenser, which means it doesn't require phantom power, and it has a fairly hot output, unlike some other broadcast dynamics, so it doesn't need a super hot preamp to get a decent level out of it. If you want to go deep into microphones, I'm going to recommend the Podcastage channel on YouTube. That guy very methodically tests mics like the Podmic, and so you can easily compare how different microphones sound. Based on his testing and other reviews, I was concerned the Podmic might sound a little thin, but actually with my voice, I think it sounds fantastic. The clarity is excellent, and the built-in vibration damping means I felt no need for an external shock mount. Plosive rejection, the P sounds, is very good too, although an extra windshield never does any harm. Construction is superb. The thing weighs about 2 pounds, which is a lot more than you would think just by looking at it, and the mounting arm is solid and dependable. Honestly, for the price, I did not expect the Podmic to be this good. For a while, I've been eyeing up the Shure SM7B, the stereotypical podcast mic, which is excellent, but it costs around $400, and it often needs an extra device like a cloud lifter to boost its gain to a usable level. But having used this Podmic on my streams for a few weeks, I can say that idea is over. I'll be buying this one from Rode. It's not going back. This is going to be my live microphone moving forward. So there you go, my take on the Rodecaster Pro. I will be buying the Podmic straight away. I won't be buying a Rodecaster Pro immediately because I'm not doing any projects which need it. But the minute that I do, and I do have some in the pipeline, I'll just be clicking buy straight away because the Rodecaster Pro just does so much stuff in that one box at a very reasonable price. You can go deep with the effects and everything else if you want to, or you can keep it super simple and just let the box do all the work. It really is very, very intuitive and very, very powerful at the same time. And that is the kind of flexibility you need, whether you're doing a speech or a music podcast. It was kind of a foregone conclusion, this one, because I have used one before. I recorded a voiceover using one at our office in LA, and I've also been on a couple of podcasts where it's been used to great effect. The Mickey D's podcast and the Crossfader podcast. I was on both of those, both times using the Rodecaster Pro, and it was fantastic. A really good experience for the hosts and the guests. So yeah, it's a solid recommend from me, absolutely. If you think podcasting could be a route that you want to go down in these changing times that we're in, well, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a great investment for you. Thank you for watching today. Make sure you subscribe for all our future tips, tricks, and product reviews. I'll see you soon.